Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 5th annual Society Sunday lecture. My name is Katie Petroli. I'm the Vice President of Societies for the Archaeological Institute of America, or the AIA. I'm also the Assistant Director here at the Nashville Parthenon and serve as the Outreach Coordinator for the AIA Nashville Society, which is just one of more than 100 AIA societies worldwide. If you are affiliated with a local AIA society, please feel free to shout out your local society in the chat. Today's lecture is available in American Sign Language with interpretation provided by Trailblazing Interpreters. Please use the desktop version of Zoom to access this feature. We also enabled auto captions today, if you would like to use them. Through its societies, the AIA promotes archaeological inquiry and public understanding of the material record of our human past to foster an appreciation of diverse cultures and our shared humanity. To start off Society Sunday, I'd like to highlight a few of our 2025 award-winning local societies. We have the Best Website Award, awarded to the Santa Fe Society. The Best Poster Award, awarded to the Oklahoma Society. And our Golden Trowel Award going to Central Carolinas Society. And of course, I can't mention society awards without inviting you to submit a nomination, a short and sweet process that celebrates your society. So check out the awards now with the link in the chat. On behalf of the AIA, we invite you to register for our upcoming Archaeology Hour virtual program, March 19th, 7 p.m. Central, and there's a link in the chat for you to follow. AIA staff, including Meredith and Sarah, have been working hard organizing Archaeology Hours and putting together Society Sunday for us AIA members. I'm confident I speak for many of us when I say to the AIA team, thank you. I'm also grateful to former VP of Societies, Dr. Sabrina Higgins, for her work in founding and coordinating today's program. If this is your first AIA program or you are not yet affiliated with a local society, welcome. I encourage you to consider becoming an AIA member, getting involved with the local society, and taking advantage of all the benefits your membership has to offer. Society Sunday brings together AIA societies from around the world, sharing exciting research with our audience gathered together virtually. As archaeology enthusiasts who share the love of archaeology, this program is a great example of how donations to the AIA Annual Fund support the AIA's mission to excavate, advocate, and educate with dedication to the preservation of cultural heritage worldwide. We hope that Society Sunday and your local AIA societies are a place for you to connect and engage with the archaeological world. First, we will hear from the AIA New Orleans Society about a special program funded by a society outreach grant in 2024. Then I will introduce our speaker who will share her research on late postclassic period Maya archaeology. And after her talk, we will have time for questions. Please ask questions via the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will have time for questions at the end of the lecture. Today, recording by attendees is not permitted. All right, so let's hear from our friends at the New Orleans Society sharing about a recently completed society outreach program with Glasgow Middle School.
In November of 2024, my Roman technology students held an archaeology outreach event for the East Baton Rouge Parish School community called Can You Dig It? An evening of hands-on history and archaeology. Hi, I'm Natalie Roy, a teacher at Glasgow Middle School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I teach Latin and 2 courses I've developed to center the unheard voices of the ancient Mediterranean world. Students in my Myth Makers and Roman technology classes reproduce the products and processes and stories of ancient daily life through hands-on history, STEM labs, and experimental archaeology. In 2024, I was named a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow with National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. Although my students and I have been doing classical spring outreach programs at a local museum for the past 3 years called All STEM Leads to Rome, this archaeology outreach project grew out of my work with National Geographic. The event was planned and presented by my middle school students in collaboration with the Louisiana Division of Archaeology and funded partly by the Archaeological Institute of America. Throughout the year, Roman technology students learn how archaeological sites and material culture tell the stories of everyday people. They wanted to share what they've learned so far this year and promote the study of ancient archaeology. They spent 2 weeks leading up to the event preparing and training for it. They practiced giving their presentations and learned how to engage with the public with a particular focus on young children. The event happened in our school's gymnasium and saw about 150 guests. Upon entering the event, each participant received a passport, which they used to collect stamp impressions at each station they visited. To incentivize visiting each station, we collected completed passports and entered them into a raffle for door prizes, such as a 3D printed Roman dodecahedron, Nat Geo branded stickers and water bottles, and merch from the Louisiana Division of Archaeology. All stations were interactive and run by the students, except for one. The Louisiana Division of Archaeology offered 2 activities. One taught students about stratigraphy with colored sand art in plastic bottles, and the other gave out tiny individual dig boxes for students to excavate on the floor where a plastic tablecloth kept the dirt contained. In another station, students explained the mystery behind Roman dodecahedrons and then asked participants to handle a 3D printed model before taking a guess at what they were used for. We used the names on the guesses to give out more prizes. At the next station, participants explored writing with oak gall ink, foraged and made in our own classroom, on papyrus with reed pens. Using the Roman cursive alphabet, kids tried writing their names. At another station, participants were tasked with putting together a broken clay pot as they learned about the importance of potsherds to date archaeological sites. At another station, participants learned to play the ancient Roman game of rota, or wheel, a popular game with ancient children and soldiers and similar to modern tic-tac-toe. One of our most popular stations had participants recreating a Roman Solomon's knot mosaic pattern with real marble tesserae. The kids found it very relaxing and meditative. Next was another floor-based activity, putting together Roman arch block sets. Next to this station was a poster board where participants had to match up famous UNESCO World Heritage sites with their country of origin. Those who got them all right could put their name in a raffle box, which we drew from for pop-up prizes all evening. Last but not least, we set up a selfie station with one of my students playing Jupiter, sporting a beard I had crocheted. As participants took pictures using frames that mimicked the traditional National Geographic yellow rectangle, they picked out vintage magazines donated by the community and some freebie merch donated by the Division of Archaeology. We used the completed passport booklets on which we had asked for parent phone numbers to send a survey the next day. Although we got only a few responses, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We plan to repeat our work at an event called the Art and Archaeology of Ancient Egypt, a day of hands-on history, in April at the Louisiana Art and Science Museum. Students will mummify slightly used apples from our school's cafeteria, write their names in hieroglyphics, as well as build pyramids and take selfies with Egyptian gods. We look forward to many more hands-on history outreach events targeting at young future archaeologists, and we thank the AIA very much for its support. We hope you'll continue to support our endeavors.
Thank you to Natalie and the AIA New Orleans Society for an example of a fantastic K-12 collaboration. For today's main event, I am delighted to introduce Dr. Iyaxel Cojtí Ren. Originally from Chichicastenango, Guatemala, Dr. Cojtí Ren is a K'iche cultural archaeologist. She completed her PhD in the Department of Anthropology at Vanderbilt University here in Nashville, Tennessee. Since 2021, she has worked as an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin. She serves as director of the Baja Verapaz Regional Archaeological Project, PARVEZ, and as co-investigator of the MayaLex project. Her research and publications focus primarily on the archaeology, history, and culture of the Maya highland nations of Guatemala, especially from the post-classic period. Last year, she received a fellowship from the Newberry Library in Chicago, with which she plans to finish various texts for future publications. Dr. Cojtí Ren, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Katie, for your kind welcome and introductions. I would like to give a special thanks to the Archaeological Institute of America for organizing this event and for inviting me to share a piece of my research about communal government of the K'iche nations with you all. So now I'm going to proceed to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. In this presentation, I will discuss the type of government that the K'iche formed during the late postclassic period in the Maya highlands. I want to propose that the K'iche had a collective or communal government, which resulted from the integration of multiple chinamit to the K'iche regime. A chinamit was both the basic territorial unit in the Maya highlands and a corporate group that inhabited that territorial unit. The integration process not only involved the incorporation of social groups and portions of land, but also the replication of communal government and communal solidarity that existed at chinamit level. The centralized K'iche state settled at Gumarcaj, the principal K'iche civic ceremonial center, which is located in the current department of El K'iche in Guatemala. Although the literature on the K'iche is more extensive compared to other highland nations, significant gaps remain, particularly in understanding their political structures and forms of governance. One of the main areas where this gap is evident is in the ongoing debate about the nature of social and political division within K'iche society. In particular, the claim made by scholars such as Robert Carmack that postclassic K'iche society was defined by a rigid social and physical divisions between the rulers and the ruled. However, after analyzing several K'iche documents, including the Popol Vuh, the title of Totonicapán, and the Nehaip titles, I found that the K'iche most likely had a collective government where the relationship between the political elite and the K'iche people is described through the verb tzuq, meaning sustain. Nowadays, the verb tzuq is used mainly in household and family contexts when parents feed and protect their children or take care of domestic animals. However, ethnohistorical evidence and colonial dictionaries indicate that this verb was used in the past not only in household settings, but also in economic and sociopolitical contexts. Therefore, the goal of this presentation is to discuss the tzuq concept and explain how it was performed in the K'iche government. But first, who were the K'iche? During the late postclassic period, the K'iche was one of the most complex nations in the Maya highlands of what is now the Republic of Guatemala. The K'iche nation resulted from a triple alliance between three confederations, the Nima K'iche, the Tamub, and the Ilocap. Each confederation developed from the alliance between four lineages following a quadripartite model, but this number could vary slightly. A confederation was characterized by a shared territory with delimited boundaries and the possession of a principal patron deity, although it can have more than one. In this triple alliance, the Nima K'iche Confederation was the predominant one because it concentrated more political power. This confederation was composed of 4 lineages, the Kawek, Nihaib, Ahau K'iche, and Tzuq. Each lineage has its own patron deity. However, the Kawek lineage's patron deity, named Tohil, was the principal deity for the entire K'iche nation because of the predominant status of the Kawek lineage within the Confederation and the Triple Alliances. Tohil was an important element of unity, collective identity, and it was a guide for different governmental affairs. The Nima K'iche Confederation settled in a civic ceremonial center called Gumarcaj, while the other confederations settled at other urban centers named Chisalin and Chiismachi, located nearby Gumarcaj. These 3 civic ceremonial centers were surrounded by small rural villages called chinamit, occupied by K'iche vassals or taxpayers. The Dominican Fray Francisco Jimenez noted that the chinamits were dispersed in the mountains because the people lived near their milpas to supply themselves with food. He added that the K'iche settlements pattern resembled the body of a spider, where the legs were the rural hamlets that were connected to a civic ceremonial center. To explain how the K'iche people became one of the strongest polities in the Maya highlands, it is important to understand the impact of integrating multiple chinamit into the K'iche regime. Basically, the K'iche state benefited from the chinamits' resources, their work, community values, and their organizational capacity. But to understand the relevance of this integration process, we need to understand very well what a chinamit is. So a chinamit has been defined as an extended family or lineage, especially in elite context. A chinamit also designated a corporate and close social group above the level of kinship, whose members had held land in common and recognized a number of primary rights and obligations vis-a-vis other members of the group. Scholars also understand a chinamit as the basic territorial unit in the Maya highlands that was ruled by an individual from the predominant family of the chinamit. For me, all definitions are correct because a chinamit was not an static entity. It could emerge as a family and grow to develop as a corporate social group whose members occupy a delimited territory. The head of a chinamit was called the Utsam Chinamital, and his major role was to protect the members of the community and their resources. According to Fray Jimenez, the head of the chinamit were like defenders of each member of the community, no matter if they were poor or rich. If a member of the chinamit committed an offense or a crime, the head of the chinamit would defend him to prevent harsher punishment or imprisonment. For example, the inspector Lara Mongroviejo, after he visited the towns of Zapotitlan and Soconusco in the Pacific coast in the 17th century, he commented that the town majors could not seize and jail indigenous people who had committed offenses without the consent of the head of the chinamit. And if a person was already locked up in jail, the head of the chinamit would take him out, probably after the payment of bail or compensation that was collected among the members of the chinamit. During the colonial period, these leaders elaborated wills instead of the municipality officials. They also appear as key witnesses in land disputes and as defenders of the community's lands against any kind of threat. These examples of the colonial period help to understand the practice of tzuq or tzuq, which means sustain, by local indigenous authorities. Another important aspect of a chinamit that should be emphasized is that its members practice communal solidarity. Communal solidarity was manifested as high organization and participation to solve problems, defend the territory, and support each family or member of the chinamit. Because all members of a chinamit participate in the maintenance and continuity of the community, a communal or collective government was exerted. Nowadays, there are terms in K'iche' and Kaqchikel languages that reflect collective work and communal solidarity that have persisted for centuries. Some important terms are uch or uchuj. Uch is defined as the collective work where time, energy, and effort are invested to collaborate in a project such as the building of a road, a school, or other projects that would benefit the community. It is also the action of agreeing and getting together to help a member or a family of the community when it comes to planting or harvesting their milpa. Uchuj is also known as common chak, communal work. It is the action of doing collective work within a family or a community. This practice has an ancient origin since this concept or similar ones appear in colonial dictionaries. For instance, the term kuchum or kuchubej are defined as the action of coming together or helping each other in the cultivation or other activities related to the milpa or cornfields. Another communal practice among the K'iche' and Kaqchikel was the nut or the kuch. The nut was an imposed contribution that was given to help a member of a chinamit. For example, in the colonial period, head of chinamits would request from house to house the contribution of 10 or 20 cacao seeds to help a family member or someone from the chinamit who is getting married, has a dispute, or is in jail. Maybe you may know that cacao seeds was a currency that was used during the pre-contact time. In a chinamit, each person is important to ensure the well-being of the entire community, and leaders are expected to protect the chinamit's interests and resources. An important question to ask is whether this practice of community solidarity were incorporated into the K'iche' government. For me, the answer is yes, because the K'iche' state was made up of strong chinamit whose representatives had the moral obligation to contribute materially and through their services for the well-being of K'iche' communities. There was a mutual dependency between rulers and ruled, which was kept by the fulfillment of their rights and obligations. The breaking of this balance could cause internal revolts or the destitution of a ruler and the humiliation of his family. I think that it is in this mutual dependency between rulers and ruled where the verb tzuq, sustain, is applied. Now let's explore a little bit more this tzuq concept. It is very easy to find information of these two concepts, tzuq or ko, both are synonyms. And I'm going to read very quickly some of the entrants that I found in K'iche' and Kaqchikel dictionaries. The first one, tzuq, to maintain by giving sustenance to person or animals under one care. Feeding or maintaining the members of a family and domestic animals such as chicken, pigs, and horses to give tribute. It can also explain the relationship of sustenance between God and people. People sustain God, and he in turn sustains people with food. We can see that there are many entries, all of them connected with the idea of feeding, sustaining, and also paying taxes or taking care of others. The verb tzuq, sustain, is used only when there is a strong relationship between the subjects involved and a commitment to take care of others on a long-term basis. For example, the verb tzuq is used when mothers feed a baby with breast milk or when parents feed their children. People also use this term when feeding domestic animals. A different situation happens when a visitor or a foreigner arrives at a particular house and asks for food. The house owner then will say, in K'iche' language, kaya uwa ukia, which translates as give him food and drink instead of sustain him, because this is a random event. In K'iche' and Kaqchikel colonial documents, this verb appears in religious, economic, and political contexts, specifically when describing the relationship between patron deities, K'iche' authorities, and K'iche' taxpayers. Now I will describe how the K'iche' vassals sustained the K'iche' rulers, and then I will present how the K'iche' authorities sustained the members of K'iche' members of the communities during the post-classic period. K'iche' vassals sustained the rulers through the payment of taxes and by providing different services. The K'iche' term for tribute was patan, a concept that also meant occupation and service. The person who paid taxes was called patan, meaning he, she who pays taxes or provide services. The action of paying taxes was also expressed by the verb tzuq or tzuq, sustain, which is mentioned in colonial K'iche' and Kaqchikel dictionaries in other colonial documents. The K'iche' rulers and governmental officers depended on mixed revenues, which means that they collected taxes at local level among K'iche' people, but also extracted taxes from dependent polities within the Maya highlands and beyond. Alonso de Zorita, who was a judge of Guatemala during 1553 and 1556, mentioned that K'iche' rulers extracted tributes from conquered nations and from those people who had rebelled against them. However, Fray Jimenez indicated that not all the people subject to the K'iche' fell in battle. There were people attracted by their good treatment towards people and the display of power of their rulers. Although indigenous texts mention tribute several times, their descriptions are brief and offer little information about its scope, management, and distribution. However, documents written by other highland nations and Spanish authorities provide more information about this institution. Fray Bartolomé de las Casas indicated that highland peoples paid taxes every 80 days, as the Mexica did. Zorita described the taxes collection process as very orderly and harmonious. Each province or town pays tribute with local crops based on its type of climate and land. This coincides with what Martín Alfonso Tobilla, a Spanish captain, said about this issue. He noticed that taxes were paid to the K'iche' in accordance with the fruit of the lands where people lived, such as cacao, vanilla, cotton, feathers, deer, tigers, fish, quail, turkeys, and carved stone for their buildings. This facilitated the payment of tribute since individuals did not have to go from cold to hot land and vice versa. The most common taxes paid were food, including corn, beans, squash, honey, salt, cacao, pataste, fruits, and legumes. People also paid taxes with different materials such as cotton, feathers, wood, fat wood, construction materials, and materials to make weapons. Merchants and probably artisans were requested to pay taxes with their own products or with the profits of their businesses. According to the Popol Vuh, which is a very important K'iche' document, small and large communities pay taxes to Gumarcaj's supreme authorities. Among the prestige items presented before them were turquoise, metal, precious gems, jade, cotinga feathers, oriole feathers, and red bird feathers. Regarding the presentation of services, the most common activities performed by vassals were to cultivate the ruler's land for their sustenance, to work in their homes, to work in the construction of buildings, including the patron deities' temples, and to participate as warriors in time of war. One important aspect of the payment of taxes is that people did not pay it individually, but collectively as a chinamit. Authorities determined the amount of taxes and the frequency of payment based on the number of members in each community. The taxes received from local communities and from other regions were used to sustain rulers, government officials, and skilled workers who worked for them. Taxes were also used to deliver diplomatic gifts, to establish peaceful alliances with other nations, to sponsor collective ceremonies, and rituals dedicated to the patron deities. To understand the way rulers sustain the K'iche' commoners or taxpayers, first it is necessary to know its organization. The anthropologist Robert Carmack was the first to identify that in the K'iche' government there were 3 levels of authorities, which show the complexity of its administration and the intricate relationship between the central government and K'iche' populations. The first level authorities in the K'iche' government were the principal rulers of the 3 allied confederations. Each confederation elected 4 principal authorities who held specific titles. The 4 principal rulers of the Nima K'iche' were the Amaq, the Kamha, the Kalel, and Atzih Winak. The first 2 titles, the Amaq and the Kamha, were the supreme authorities of the K'iche' government, who were only elected within the Kawek lineage of the Nima K'iche', while the other officials with lower ranks, such as the Kalel and the Atzih Winak, were elected among the other lineages of the confederations. Amaq means literally he of the mat. The ancient lords sat on mat or thrones covered with a mat, which became symbolic of lordship and authority itself. Among the Tamu, their 4 authorities held the titles Amaq Tam, Kalel Tam, Kalel Kakoh, and Atzih Winak Kakoh. I agree with Carmack when he stated that the Tamu obtained an Amaq title late in their history, which granted this confederation with more political power behind the Nima K'iche' confederation. Unfortunately, there is not much information about the Ilocaf confederation, but according to Carmack, their authorities also carried the Kalel and the Atzih Winak titles. A person with the Kalel title functioned in the judicial field and was the one who explained, questioned, witnessed, and denounced various matters and advised the main authorities in decision-making. The position of Atzih Winak could correspond to the spokesperson of the people with more administrative than legislative function. He could also have had a function of advisor to the Amaq. The second level authorities of the K'iche' government held official titles with administrative, judicial, and religious duty in the K'iche' government. They were positioned under the 4 principal authorities of each confederation of the Triple Alliance. The Nima K'iche' confederation had 24 governmental officials, the Tamu 22, while the Ilocaf had 18 officials. Since these authorities met in special buildings called Nimha, that means Great House, to deliver on important issues that affect the K'iche' political community, these officials' positions were also called Nimha or Great Houses. According to Fray Jimenez, the leaders of the 24 great houses from Gumarcaj form a council of authorities who together decide on the main issues of the community, including warfare, constructive works, among others. Jimenez also commented that these officials distribute the conquered territories among themselves, so they had the option to settle within the city of Gumarcaj or settle in a dependent polity where they would be sustained by local communities. This council of authorities represented a mechanism to limit the agency of the first level rulers, although it is not difficult to imagine that there must have been differences and rivalries between them. The group of officials of each confederation formed a hierarchical system in which low-ranking officials could climb through the position and eventually be able to hold the highest position. Francisco Fuentes y Guzman, he was a Spanish chronicler, commented that to opt for the highest position in government, individuals should perform the lowest position first. This ensures that principal authorities have merit and sufficient experience to govern rather than relying solely on kinship to current rulers. In other words, the K'iche' government had a hierarchical system where lower authorities could climb through all the positions until they gain experience, knowledge, and skills that would make them excellent candidates for the highest positions. Currently, in several towns of the Maya highlands of Guatemala, there are indigenous institutions such as the indigenous municipality and cofradías or brotherhoods that have kept this tiered system of organization with elders with considerable experience perform the main positions. Lastly, the third level authorities were commonly called the Utzam Chinamital, the head of a chinamit. These leaders were also members of the K'iche' ruling lineages, and during the K'iche' expansion between 1400 and 1475, their number progressively increased. The Utzam Chinamital were generally accompanied by other officials who held the titles Rahpop Atzalam and Achtzalam. Carmack proposed that these last two titles were military positions, possibly captains who assisted the work of the head of the chinamit. Colonial dictionaries support this proposal because Achtzalam is defined as a principal who distributes the service of the Indians and the person in charge of warning those who carry burdens or messages of the consequences of neglecting their obligations. The Utzam Chinamital, together with the Achtzalam, helped to colonize new territories and found new civic ceremonial center with strong ties to Gumarcaj. According to Las Casas, the rulers of Gumarcaj also sent leaders and lieutenants to guard the borders of newly conquered lands. Las Casas may refer to another group of authorities who also took part in the colonization process of new territories. These authorities were, in the second column, you can see the second group of authorities were the Ahpop, the Kalel, Ukalel Achig, and Rahpop Achig. These titles were given to individuals as rewards for their services in the K'iche' expansionist campaigns. These individuals were commoners or warriors who stood out in battle or in other contexts. These four authorities also form a quadripartite government at the chinamit level. It is important to mention that these two groups of third-level authorities received different symbols of authority from the rulers of Gumarcaj. The first group, the Utzam Chinamital and the Achtzalam and the Rahpop Achtzalam, they received symbols such as the canopy, throne, the cougar paw, jaguar paw, precious or yellow stone, metal artifacts, among others. On the other hand, the second group of authorities received symbols more related to the office of warriors or captains. They received weapons, bundles of arrowheads, flags, and special bundles of authority. The difference in the set of symbols received by both groups of authorities could explain that the first had higher status, while the second group probably was subordinated to the first one. In sum, these third-level authorities function as intermediaries between the central authorities of Gumarcaj and local population, and their functions were focused on ensuring the continuity of the chinamits and fulfilling the orders coming from the central government. Through the K'iche' expansion, the K'iche' rulers were able to provide land for the K'iche' people and for their sustenance, not only in the highlands, but also in the Pacific coast and in other territories with different ecosystems and resources. The colonization process of new territories also allowed the K'iche' people to have access to a variety of resources that were exchanged in local markets. Las Casas commented that markets in the Guatemalan territory were supervised by rulers. The K'iche' rulers also worked to maintain harmony in the communities by enforcing laws and moral values, punishing people who committed crimes, and providing people access to justice at all levels. They also provided protection against rival communities and tried to keep alliances with other nations to enjoy longer periods of peace. K'iche' rulers were also in charge of sustaining the patron deities. They offered their own blood to them as expression of gratitude or as offering to request their favor. The K'iche' leaders generally perforated their ears, elbows, and other parts of their body with maguey spines and sharp sticks. Because of these activities, they were called the amaq, the blooders, the sacrificers. Fray Jimenez wrote that for the Spanish, it was hard to believe the hardness of the penances and sacrifices performed by the main priests who could be also rulers. Besides offering their own blood twice a day in times of struggle, they did penance for 4 to 8 months and even a year if it was necessary. During this time, they couldn't return to their house while staying in a small hovel close to the patron deities' temples, eating only dried corn kernels and some fruits. This action shows the sacrifices the rulers and other authorities endure to be heard and get favorable answer from the patron deities. At Gumarcaj, there were no young, inexperienced rulers. The tier system of government prevent the accession of a kid or a young man into a high-ranking position without any experience. According to the chronicler Antonio Fuentes y Guzman, rulers with experience won't be forgiven for their mistakes if they commit them. If a ruler became cruel and a tyrant, a group of lords of the government could force his destitution and name a new ruler who will inherit all his resources, leaving the former authority with nothing. This group of lords were the 24 officials or the K'iche Council. Third-level authorities had power, but it was limited by the first-level rulers from Gumarcaj, who could remove and punish them if they disobeyed orders or failed to ensure the people complied with important instructions. Lower-ranking rulers who were cruel with people could also be accused before high rulers, who together with the affected people could come to kill those rulers, take their properties, and capture all members of their families. The head of the chinamits were expected to be authorities with good qualities to rule and who would take care of the collective well-being. If a leader was very good, his position could be for life. Ethnographic research conducted in the first half of the 20th century in K'iche communities is an important source of information about changes and continuities in forms of governance. An exemplary case is that of the community of Chichicastenango. By the way, that's my hometown, Chichicastenango. Chichicastenango is a K'iche municipality located south of the department of El K'iche. In 1932, Ruth Bunzel, a North American anthropologist, traveled to Chichicastenango to write an ethnography. She noted that the municipality was made up of 64 cantones or rural villages surrounding its urban center. In the town, there was the Ladino municipality, which was an extension of the state government, and the indigenous municipality. Ladino, in this context, is a term used to refer a Guatemalan person of mixed indigenous and Spanish ancestry, or someone or something that is non-indigenous. In each municipality, there was a mayor, and both were the highest authorities of the town. In addition to the two mayors mentioned above, in each of the 64 villages, 2 representatives were elected, an auxiliary mayor and a principal at the local level. The auxiliary mayor was like the representation of the Ladino municipality at the village level, while the principal was a local neighbor representing the village who would defend its interest. Both were the people's representative before the municipal authorities and were mainly in charge of administrative and judicial matters. They had the task of collecting quotas of money to finance public works or ceremonial activities instructed by the municipal authorities. They organized the peoples of their villages for public work when necessary. They also served as witnesses and arbitrators in the purchase, sale, and distribution of land. Also, they help to delimit territorial borders, and also they participate as witnesses in marriage-related issues. The 64 villages were divided into 5 districts, although in the minds of the authorities there were to be 4 districts facing the worldly directions. The villages of each district, through their local principals and auxiliary mayors, elect a district representative, resulting in the election of 5 principal at the municipal level. Bunzel noted that these 5 principals were the ones that truly had real political authority. The position of a principal was for life, but not inherited, since upon the death of a principal, a new authority was elected. Some of their tasks included appointing as well as dismissing auxiliary majors according to their performance, communicating messages and orders from the 2 majors to the authorities of each village and vice versa, and preserving important titles and maps of the town, and protecting and repairing the town's property, such as the church and the cemetery. They also channeled the protest of the population to the majors, and if the two municipal authorities did not listen to them, the 5 principals could escalate the case to higher authorities, including the president of the country. If the president or other authorities hear the case, all members of the villages pool money to pay the expenses incurred by the 5 principals. Okay, now the conclusions. Please bear with me. The verb tzuq, sustain, appears in K'iche documents and colonial dictionaries to describe the relationship between patron deities, K'iche authorities, and K'iche population during the pre-Columbian time. This verb denotes the existence of mutual dependency and a long-term commitment to serving for the well-being of the community. Despite the hierarchical structure present in the K'iche government, each official played an important role in the conservation of the confederation and the protection of the people under their authority. Rulers had limited agency, since there were mechanisms to punish their bad behavior or negligence with the help of the Council of the Authorities and by organized protest. It is interesting to note that despite indigenous authorities were eliminated, replaced, or forced to work for the Spanish regime during the colonial period, Spanish chroniclers, religious and political authorities left written comments about the high organization and good characteristics of the K'iche government. Nowadays, there are some publications about indigenous government and justice systems, which accounts for the persistence of collective government. For example, the K'iche sociologist Gladys Tzuq points out that in the department of Totonicapán, which is another K'iche community, a communal government is practiced. In this type of government, local authorities and the K'iche population collaborate to implement a work strategy called Kashkol. Kashkol is the service that one provides for the good of the community without remuneration, and that entails an obligation, a responsibility, and a great sacrifice. In closing, I will cite the definition of authority according to contemporary Guatemalan ancestral authorities that says, an authority known as an amaq or amaq is someone who wields power, but is not someone who wields power, but someone who has a responsibility to their peers. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Iyaxel, for sharing your research on K'iche communal government. We do have time for some questions. So at this time, I'd like to invite our audience to submit questions into the Q&A, and I will relate them to Dr. Cojtí Ren. And if you'd like to stop sharing your screen, you're welcome to as well. We have quite a few questions to start us off about the roles of women during this time in K'iche communal government, also in society in general, if you would like to answer that.
Sure, yes. I think in K'iche documents, the main role of women basically were to accompany K'iche authorities. Usually, in many documents appears the name of the founding couples of a chinamit. Basically, K'iche authors, the authors of these documents, highlight who were the grandmothers or the mothers of the ruling lineages. So basically, they are also strong authorities. However, there is not much description about their roles. Now we can complement that information with ethnographic data. But unfortunately, in the K'iche documents, we cannot find much information, but we know the names of the founding mothers, the grandmothers. But also, it's interesting to know that I have found in some K'iche documents that women also were important captains. There were female captains that were leading groups of warriors. So I have found a couple of mentions, which is interesting, that there were brave women who also lead groups of warriors in times of war. I think there are in the historical part of the K'iche documents, I think we still need to read between lines to get that information. But as I mentioned before, we can expand that data with ethnographic research. But in the case of the pre-Hispanic data, we don't know. We don't have much information.
Thank you. Our next question: is there archaeological evidence in terms of architectural remains or artifacts that come to mind that reflect the communal nature of K'iche society?
Yes. First of all, I have to say that in the Maya highlands, there aren't many archaeological projects because, well, there are many factors. There are many factors, including the civil war that lasted more than 36 years in the Maya highlands. Basically, it was very dangerous for archaeologists to go to this area to work. So basically, even now, there are just a few archaeological projects in this region. So we don't have, I'm relying on indigenous documents to rebuild the history of the like post-classic K'iche. But I will say that one important archaeological evidence will be the Nim house, this long structure. I think we have seen that in post-classic sites, this building are very important. Basically, they are surrounding the main plazas of the post-classic sites, so they play an important role. But we need to discuss more, I think, exchange information about what was the function of this. But I believe that authorities of each confederation have this type of building because it's where they met, when they get together to discuss about important issues related with the administration of the K'iche nation. Yes, so buildings, and then we will need to find more evidence or correlates to see the presence of communal solidarity or community, the communal government. But I think that also the presence of plazas, the plazas itself, there are like gathering places. So I think that they probably function as market, but also at open spaces for people to gather.
Our next question is, with respect to symbols of authority, is it possible that chert eccentric flints were used as rewards to reflect recognition of individuals? Oh,
probably. I think in the Maya lowlands, we can see the use of eccentrics as symbols of authority. Probably we need to know if they were given also to warriors to reward them, or were passed from one authority to their relatives or their family members. But in this list, the list that I mentioned, yes, basically warriors receive like weapons, different types of weapons as symbols of authority. So yes, that's a possibility. Mm-hmm.
And could authorities move both up and down between levels of authority?
Oh, usually I think the right is go to lower rank to become like a lower to a higher rank authority. That was the route from bottom to top. I think this is like a tier system that has persisted for centuries in the Maya highlands. We can see examples of that in different indigenous institutions in the Maya highlands. Yeah, but an authority can go down, but it's because it committed it failed their responsibilities or commit an offense, and that's the reason he can be removed from their position. But it's not that it's going down; it's just being removed from this tier system of authorities. Mhm.
Our next question, there's also a thank you for an informative presentation first. How do you think the lowland classic Mayas influenced the organization of the post-classic highland Mayas?
I can see similarities between the sociopolitical organization of the post-classic Yucatec societies. I think there are more resemblance in the political organization between the the governments in the Yucatan Peninsula during the post-classic period and the Maya highlands in the same period of time. But I think it's a little bit different from the government of the classic period, which is centralized in the Kohula Howard, just one person. Now in the post-classic, we have a shared government between a group of lineages, usually following a quadripartite model. But I can see that there are other practices that are very ancient that maybe share with the Maya, the classic Maya. I think the term ahau is evidence of that. Like a common element in this political sphere. I think it has the same meaning and the same function. And also the topic about rewarding people, this social mobilization within the warfare sphere, the war sphere, and also the social mobilization in other spheres. I think there are things that are similar of what happened in the classic period and the lowlands as well.
Our next question, to what extent does K'iche politics play a role in modern Guatemalan politics?
Oh, I think it's very strong. It's very strong because at the beginning I was thinking about presenting the case of the Guatemalan elections because I think that the current government in Guatemala arrived to that position with the help of indigenous organizations and indigenous communities and leaders, because we passed to a moment of struggle when the elected president last year couldn't take position because there were other forces impeding basically his basically there were other forces that was avoiding him to like be how would you say, well, in resume, I think that yes, they play an important role today because the politics now needs the support of indigenous leaders and communities, organized communities, to defend democracy, because there is a lot of corruption in our country, so they play a big role in defending democracy and also the Constitution of Guatemala.
I have a question about how various positions were chosen. Were there ballots like an election today might have? Was it by raising hands or some other form?
I think yes. Usually people get together in open areas, and they basically, questions are asked to them if they want to, first of all, to propose if they have the names of people who they select as the potential leaders, and then usually people express who are their favorites. But no, there are no papers or ballots. Basically, in open spaces, they raise their hands, or they basically provide a signs who of the potential candidates are their favorite.
Our next question is about some of the images in your presentation today. Does the artwork demonstrate some of the political structures you described, or some of the women in political positions?
Could you repeat that question again, please?
Yes, it was about the artwork in your presentations, if it shows the political structures of K'iche government or women in those positions?
I think these images represent mostly the political positions, or like the position that were held by different authorities. But authorities usually are accompanied by their wife, as I mentioned before. We only have the male names, but we know that authorities usually are accompanied by their wives and their family. That is why these positions are called as Nimha, great house. And house is also another term used to say family. Ha, which translates as house, is also a term that was used to say family. So when we talk about 24 Nimha, we are talking about 24 families who are composed of like the mother or the female authority and their children.
Next question. What sanctions kept these leaders from grabbing power from the structures that held them accountable?
I think that the authorities also have to share the moral values of the people, and they have to be good examples for the entire society. So they were under the eyes of everyone. They also have to perform before the K'iche societies, and like they have to lead public events. So basically, they were under the eyes of the entire society, so that there was a lot of social pressures. But also, I think the Council of Authorities, who have more experience and other principles, they know how a ruler should behave. So basically, there were many mechanisms to supervise and also held the rulers accountable.
And what was the territorial limit of the K'iche at the end of the post-classic period?
Oh, I think I have this map. No, I know. I don't know if you can see, but this is some of the points. Well, this map shows the towns that were basically defeated or basically they gave themselves to the K'iche'. So we can see that the area covers the Pacific coast, part of the highlands, and also in an area between the lowlands and the highlands. So all these red points represent places that the K'iche' said that they defeated local communities. Mm-hmm.
And our next question is, how did the Spanish, upon assuming rule over the area, integrate their structure of government and religion with the existing governing structure? Because the chinamit structure, as you pointed out, still exists in Chichicastenango. There's continuity to this day.
Katie, could you please repeat? Sorry, I got distracted from a noise around here. Sorry.
How did the Spanish, upon assuming rule over the area, integrate their structure of government and religion with the existing the K'iche' governing system? Because there is continuity, as you discussed, from across time periods, even though the Spanish were ruling the area.
Yes, when the Spanish arrived, they established different colonial institutions, and they recognized that they needed the help of local authorities or indigenous authorities. So basically, they were in some way not negotiated, but they giving some privileges in order to get that help. But I have to say that K'iche' elite also were trying to survive the colonial period because they were displaced. They were replaced by Spanish authorities. So basically, they also want to keep their privileges, and also in order to help their own communities. So basically, they acceded to basically in some way be part of that new Spanish regime. So basically, there is not. We cannot generalize to say that all of them accepted, but there were different types of negotiation between Spanish authorities and indigenous authorities. But one of the institutions that was basically brought by the K'iche authorities was the Brotherhoods of Cofradías, and we know from different publications and research that basically the K'iche authorities use this institution, this Catholic basically institution, to keep K'iche culture or any other culture in the Maya highlands. So basically, this colonial institution were used to as a way to survive, even though it were look a little bit different. But I think it's transformed. The indigenous people transform in some way these colonial Spanish institutions, basically to use to their favor and survival.
Here's a question about the cargo system. How does the cargo system overlap with K'iche community practices?
I think it's very similar. Yes, I can see that the cargo system, it's a continuity. It's a continuity of this type of organizations, and I think that this is for me, it's a new topic to explore. I think that in order to talk about the K'iche government, I need to explore more this brotherhood system and the cargo system, which is very important. But I can recognize clearly like the similarities in their organization that use this tier system or hierarchical order. But I will say that even though it's hierarchical, each official in this cargo system play a key role in fulfill their goals. I think that hierarchy is not seen as something that is dangerous because because the highest position were performed by people who have the merit and the experience to basically hold that positions.
And when someone was removed from office, were they expelled from the area to prevent further trouble?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, all of them are good, but it's very interesting because when one authority is removed from their position, basically all his family suffer the consequences of that. Basically, they usually would become slaves or servants to the new authority or other authority. Basically, it's like the destruction of the lineage. But I don't know if, well, this is some of the description that I have found in colonial documents, but possibly maybe there were other consequences. But one of them is that the family members of a leader that was removed, basically they became slaves or servants. And all their possessions were removed and taken by the new authority.
I have a question about property. So in a communal system, was land property owned by the government or by families or lineages?
In the case of the chinamit, there was like a shared territory, but each family were assigned a piece or a portion of land within this territorial unit that was the chinamit. So if the family basically migrate to another chinamit, let's say, basically that land in the past became communal again. If there is new members of the chinamit, basically the leader, the Usam Chinamital, will give that land. But I won't say that it's like it's not private property, but it's a land that you can possess as long as your family occupied and contribute to the maintenance of the community.
And our final question of the night, In what ways did earlier Maya political structures in the region shape the development of this governing structure?
The current government?
I think the K'iche communal government structure.
Yes, I think that now in the K'iche region, there are ancestral authorities, but also there are new types of authority which we call the cocodes, which in Spanish says the Consejo de Desarrollo Comunitario. And I think that they are also important to the continuity of the communities. They also help people with communal projects. But I think that we need to support more ancestral authorities who, well, in some cases in my hometown, they have told me, because of this new organization of the cocodes, I think that people, they are gaining more authority at the local level, while the ancestral authorities are like losing more responsibility and more authority because of this new type of organization that was imposed by the central government. So I think that there should be more work to do in order to both types of authority to collaborate together. It's not a competition, but I think that there is not much communication between them. And I think that in the case of Chichicastenango, we should support more the indigenous municipality, who I think some members have told me in the past that now there are no new authorities who don't respect them or don't include them, or they are excluded from town decisions. So I think that it is important to strengthen them. In some K'iche communities, ancestral authorities are strong, but in other communities, the ancestral authorities are weak. So there are different situations in the Maya highlands, but I think that we need to understand more how it was in the past in order to maybe help in some way to strengthen these indigenous authorities now.
Thank you very much. Everyone, I hope you will please join me in thanking Dr. Iyaxel Cojtí Ren for presenting and sharing her work today. To my fellow AIA members, between today's Society Sunday, January's annual meeting, we've had a strong archaeological start to the year. The AIA has so many interesting lectures coming up in 2025. I encourage you to browse the AIA event calendar or connect with your local societies. If you're not yet a member, I hope today has shown you what the Archaeological Institute of America has to offer, and we look forward to welcoming you into the AIA. Thank you all for joining Society Sunday 2025.